Kevin Peranio, Chief Lending Officer, one of the partners of Paramount Residential Mortgage Group, and also a new board member of the California Mortgage Bankers Association. Thank you to Susan Milazzo and the entire board for putting on this great show. It's the people here, it's the last great tech show before the fall. And I literally was just getting a text from one of my account executives on the wholesale side in Dallas. He says, hey, this mortgage technology show, is coming up in October. Should I go? I was like, don't even bother, dude. You should be right here in California. So, no, but I think I love how this thing keeps building momentum, despite it being a down year. But I think people are starting to feel a little bit more positive about the business based on the last couple months. You see these little flashes of greatness or upticks, and it starts to give you more and more hope. So I am not a negative person. Nobody's got time for that. There's no point, right? Like, we know that we go up and down in this business. The last half of last year was brutal. But I'm going to talk about why going forward, we're all in a really good spot, and how you should think about investing in tech and where, and try and even throw some predictions out there. I'm sure if anyone follows my LinkedIn content, you see I throw out a lot of predictions. I don't know. I think I'm right more than people that predict the weather. But you're welcome to follow me and give me a bunch of crap if I'm wrong. But I think for those of us here that are decision makers, I think it's time to finally get serious about your tech spend. And I'm going to give you some compelling reasons why. So let's start with just like a little bit of a recap of today. Obviously, we've had some fantastic sponsors and showcase vendor partners come up here, and it's not all just about AI, right? Like, everyone here, like, the word AI is like the buzz, right? Now, especially now in the stock market, which is ripping, and just so everyone knows, there's no I in AI, right? So, like, it's not actually intelligent. These are business rules, and they're machine learning, and it does kind of learn, and they have algorithms, but I'm telling you, like, the Terminator just ruined AI for the whole world, because some people use the word scary when they think about AI. So it's not going to come kill us all. Skynet's not coming, and they're going to take over because they're smarter than us. It's a set of rules, and it learns, and it comes up with, what it thinks is the best answer. We talked a lot about ChatGPT, which is generative pre-trained transformer. That's what the GPT stands for. And so that is a large language model. So that is different. An LLM is different than maybe an AI you might see in something for underwriting, like a Ricky. Something where you would see out there a way to do underwriting or income analysis in a better way, or something that we saw from Tavant today, or Truve. All these different ways to have predictive text, predictive analytics, ways to converse with the client, or ways to crunch data and come up with options that might be a best practice. And so when you listen to all these vendors today, are you just taking notes? Are you going to go back to your teams and say, let's implement this, let's work on this? I hope you do. And here's the reason why. Here are my compelling reasons why. Not that you need me to tell you, but technology, it helps you reduce friction, compress time, and scale your business. So scaling doesn't seem like the right word to use in a market like today, when volume is down, and our industry is a capacity model that did like 4.6 trillion just a couple years ago, and now we're barely going to scratch the surface at 1.6, 1.7. Who knows what it'll end up being at the end of the year. But scale will come back. And as capacity comes down in our business, when the business comes back and there's less of us here, you will instantly feel regret for not having invested in your technology today. And I'm here to tell you that I think next year is going to be that year for scale. But I'll get into that prognostication and make my case here in just a couple minutes. I got about 10 minutes left. So, when you're talking about technology, I think what the last year taught us was that it was cost-cutting mode. Okay, so the second half of last year was tough. That's in our senior management, our board. There's 4 of us that are shareholders in the company, and then we have our senior management. And we sit down the first Monday of every month. And of course, we have meetings all the time, right? We're not like meetings about meetings. They're not pointless. They all definitely have a purpose. And I feel like, we do a good job of trying to be judicious with our time, right? Literally talking to you about compressing time. So when you talk about the last half of last year, that was brutal. Brad was up here earlier talking about emotional intelligence, EQ, and where borrowers' mindsets are at. So a year ago, you go from February, lowest rates in the history of history, literally ever, rapidly going up, into the 7% range. And then starting in June last year, home prices actually started coming down. And so when you have that really volatile move, that fast uptick in rates, it's scary. You hear recession over and over and over on the news, and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to wait till the market crashes. But it didn't crash. In fact, rates peaked last November. Could they touch that peak again? Maybe. We're kind of close now, but it's not as volatile getting there. So borrowers want certainty versus uncertainty. There's one thing for certain: they need a roof over their head. Everyone needs a roof over their head. So whether they're a renter or their credit invisible, they've got to put shelter over their head. First-time home buyers who finally make that move, whether it's the 7 Ds, I'm sure you've heard me say that again, although I heard another D the other day, but you've got life events, right? Deployment. I always say deployment first because of our veterans and what they did for our country. You've got diamonds, which leads to diapers, which leads to debt, which leads to divorce, which leads to debt again, but we already said it, so we can't say it again. Then there's downsizing, and then there's death. So those are the 7 Ds. Those are life events, and they make you want to get a house. You got to get a house. I heard diploma as well, which I thought was interesting. I'm like, how old was I when I got my diploma? Yeah, I wasn't ready for a house, but it does make you think about it. So maybe there's 8 Ds. But that stuff's not stopping. And so whatever demand was on pause the first half of last year, the second half of last year for sure, when rates were volatile, we've been seeing come through. And so as rates improved a little bit here, coming into the spring purchase season, March, April, May, June, for us, and I don't think we're a special company. We have 3 channels. We're privately owned. We're what's known as an independent mortgage banker. But like my dad said at the end of 2007, when the company I used to work for crashed out of business, said, son, you didn't make the wave, but you look good riding it. And I don't surf. So, but it was cool to hear him say that. And that it still resonates with me. So these waves we don't make. But those waves are coming back into favor. Obviously, the spring purchase season was good. I think the second half of this year will not be near as bad as the second half of last year, which is why I think the worst is over. So if you're thinking about spending, are you still in survival mode? Are you in cost-cutting mode? Are you in investment mode? What's going to make you get out of survival, cut costs, hold back to, I'm going to forge ahead, I'm going to be the tip of the spear going into what's going to be a better time, a better market? I don't know. Every company, every individual, every vendor, every lender, everyone has to make that decision. Every originator, every realtor has to make that decision when to push forward and say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I think if I could give a couple more facts to get us moving forward, and then I'll even go into like the fear-based motivation, which is not really my thing. But, this demand is driven for borrowers for those life events to buy houses. But obviously affordability is a big deal. And what we're seeing is in the low 6s, we saw a lot of borrowers come off the shelf and want to get out there. And then when you get into the high 6s and 7% range, it's a little bit, untenable for certain people. We obviously have a supply problem. 1% of the entire housing stock has a $200,000 house price. Less than 5% of the entire housing stock is between $200,000 and $300,000. So when rates come back down, it does bring a lot of first-time home buyers back into the affordability range, especially considering home prices are higher, but so are loan amounts. And that's why next year is going to be an enormous year. So think about the last 12 months, first-time home buyers doing loans in the 6 to 7% range. We probably have another 12 months of that. Let's call it 1.5 plus 1.5, maybe 1.3, but just for round numbers. We have $3 trillion in purchases in a 24-month period, give or take, at much higher loan amounts. It doesn't take much for the rate to come down and be a cost net tangible benefit on a refinance. So I think next year could be the 4th biggest year in the history of mortgage. So $2.87 trillion is the 4th biggest year. And you got $3 trillion eligible for refinance as soon as the Fed starts cutting. Now, they paused today. The Fed paused today. The Fed stopped raising the Fed funds rate. So that brought some certainty to the market. But of course, they had to be hawkish with their comments and basically say, well, we still think that we have a couple more rate hikes to do, but we thought we were going too fast, so we're stopping today. But the smart money thinks they're done. And at the next meeting and then the meeting after that, if they don't raise, you get more certainty, and that brings more money into fixed income securities like mortgage-backed securities, which ultimately brings rates down. The median time from when the Fed paused to when they cut is 4 months. 4 months. Now, the longest time, I think, was like 18 months, and that was back in 2008, after the Great Recession. So if the Fed cuts next year and interest rates come down, even slightly, I mean, high fives, mid fives, $3 trillion. I mean, it takes 75 basis points off your note rate when your average home price or median home price out there or loan out there is 360 up into the 400s, depending on your market, some even higher, especially here in Southern California, which California has 25 to 29% of all the mortgage market. So think about a quarter of our mortgage universe at these higher loan amounts with just a little bit of give in rate. Next year is going to be enormous. And it's going to feel even bigger. It's going to feel even bigger because there's less competition. I heard something like a third of all MLOs renewed their license at the end of the year last year. I know that was a fact in the state of Utah. But that's about what I see generally everywhere. But if you look at the cost to produce a loan, all these stats that come out all the time and say how much it costs to produce a loan, a lot of it comes from the mortgage originator. It doesn't take much for an originator to make a lot of money and make a living, even now. So your highest cost of production is your originator because that capacity is coming down. I would say, like us, like most lenders, we did what we had to do operationally. So we feel right-sized. Just to give an example real quick, we did $1 billion in fundings last month. We are right-sized for $650 million in business on a month. So we flexed up, and if you flex down, right, you get rid of overtime, you get rid of 32-hour work week instead of 40, but you don't lose your people. Or you use something very deflationary and you continue to invest in technology to get more out of your people so when next year hits, you're ready to rock. So I do feel the industry is pretty right-sized from an operational standpoint, and next year, I don't think we're ready for the scale that's coming. So if that's not enough motivation to get you to invest in technology, I'll give you one more. Some of the top competitors, and this is fear, okay? I'm just going to end right here. Got about a minute to go. I used to work at Dell Computers in 1999, and when I started in Austin, Texas, selling computers on the headset, dude, you're getting a Dell? That was me on the phone. Number one at close rate out of 800 reps. Anyway, I'm no longer a sales guy. I'm just a dumb executive now, so I apologize. But it was $2,000 for a computer. In 18 months, it was $499. 18 months. Michael Dell said, I have good costs to produce. I have an assembly line. Why do I let Gateway, Compaq, HP, why do I let them survive? Why do I have them in the business? Our top lenders in this industry right now are $1,500 to produce a loan, and their fee is $1,350. They print money. So if you don't want to go out of business, you got to invest in technology today. Plus, you'll reap the benefits next year. So spend that money. I think the best place to spend it right now, if you have to pick and choose, is on the originator, because they're the ones that are the most bloated in the cost structure, and we need to get deal flow in a frictionless, time-compressing manner so they can scale and you can get more units and make sure that you're profitable now, today, because when margins widen next year, we are all going to rise with the tide, and we're all going to crush it together. Some more than others, and I think the ones that are more than others are the ones that invested in technology all along the way, never stopped, and we're always change agents. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for having me here. I hope you get to meet with all these great vendors. We're going to do some closing comments and then head next door into the lab, and I think they're setting up food and drinks, and talk to these vendors. Look them in the eye. Thank them for being here. They may help you with your business. Thank you. Thank you.